There's two great ways to tax plan while you're working. The first option is to contribute to an RRSP. The second is to make a donation. Outside of that, there's more complex tax strategies, but for the majority of us, it's RRSP contributions and donations. In this video, I want to cover off RRSP contributions and 5 things most of you are doing wrong with your contributions. Let's get you back on track. Let's cover those 5 things. The first mistake many of you make is you only put cash into your RRSP. And what I mean by that is you make a contribution, money goes into your RRSP, and then it just sits there. Maybe you put it into a GIC or a high interest savings account right now because rates are high, but rates are going to start coming down. How do you save that money? Don't let it sit in cash. Remember, you can take your RRSP, your registered retirement savings plan, and invest it. Now, what you invested in, that's up to you. That's based on your risk tolerance and a bunch of different factors. But you can invest it and let that money work for you. Remember that any money in your RRSP will grow tax deferred until you take it out later on in life. So if you put in $1,000 and you just leave it there in cash, you're going to pull out the $1,000 much later in life. And you've missed a lot of opportunity. Whereas if you invest that money and grow it from $1,000 to $10,000 over the years, when you pull it out, that $9,000 was deferred. Any growth on that was deferred until you pull it out. And for 99% of you, there's 1% that won't be, but for 99% of you, your tax rates will be lower, much, much lower in retirement, meaning that you put that money in, you grew it tax deferred, you're gonna have more wealth in retirement. Now, a lot of you say, Adam, RSPs don't make sense. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but I'm going to have a future video on why RRSPs make sense and actually break down the numbers in our software. The second mistake a lot of you make, and it really cripples your retirement, is that you're taking early RRSP withdrawals. For some of you, you have an emergency and you have to do it, and that's beside the point. If that's the only option that you have and it's an absolute emergency, of course, take it out. Let's work on rebuilding it back up down the road. But for a lot of you, and I've had a few of these clients where every February, March, they call me, and it's not I'm making a contribution. It's, hey, everything I've put in over the last year, I want to pull out. We're going on a trip to Disneyland or Mexico or whatever. And it was always a family trip every year. I could not convince otherwise. I showed him many plans and numbers and showed him look, you're not going to be able to retire one day. And sure enough, he's early 60s right now. And he's in a tough position. And as much advice as I gave him, he just wouldn't listen to me. And every year, early withdrawal out of the RSP. And he set himself up to work till 80 now. He literally cannot retire. So yes, there's situations where you're going to have to pull out a little bit of money because you need it for an emergency. But for most of you, do not touch your RSPs. Let it grow tax deferred and pull it out for retirement. It's a registered savings plan for retirement. It's not for, hey, I want to upgrade my home, or hey, I need a new car. Those are terrible reasons to pull money out of an RSP. In fact, any reason other than an absolute emergency that you did not see coming in, there's no other way to draw funds to pull out money out of your RSP. So let it sit, let it kind of compound over time. Let that compounding work for you to have the greatest benefit later in retirement. The third mistake a lot of you are making, and fortunately not all of you, but a lot of you are making, is you're over contributing. And a lot of you might say, Adam, I'd love to over contribute on my RSP. I have so much room and I have no money to put in it. And definitely that's probably the majority. But there's a good handful of you that are actually putting too much into RSP. And typically, it's not someone that's just put in more than that 18%. What happens is maybe your work is contributing. So if you have a defined contribution plan at work, so let's say your work is putting in 5% and you can match 5% and you're putting in that 10% at work, and then you do another, say, 10% personally. And you've over contributed. You didn't have any carryover room. You can only put up to 18% of your income up to a certain threshold, and you've put in too much money. Now, it can be quite punitive. So it's 1% per month for over contributions. You do have a lifetime limit of $2,000 of over contribution. So you are able to put in up to $2,000 without penalty, but don't do that. don't do that. So avoid over contribution. Again, defined benefit plan is another area. So again, you have a defined benefit plan at work and they're pumping money in. You'll get something on your tax return called a pension adjustment. And your pension adjustment basically says, look, if you earned $18,000, you made $100,000 and you earned $18,000 in contribution room, you have a pension adjustment. Now, a pension adjustment, the calculation is not dollar for dollar. So if you put in, if you look at your pay stub and say, well, I put in $5,000 for my pension, so my work probably put in 5, so I put in 10. That's not the way it works. So make sure you pay attention to your pension adjustment to see how much actual contribution room you have above and beyond that. If you do find yourself in a space where you've made an overcontribution, talk to your financial advisor, but ideally you should be pulling that money out. There's actually a form that you can fill out to pull that out to avoid more penalties. So if, as soon as you catch it, make sure you pull that money out, get it back. Same with the TFSA. If you happen to overcontribute to a TFSA, there's a form, get it out, avoid those penalties. The fourth mistake a lot of you are making are you're spending your tax refund. So you put $5,000 into your RSP and you get back $1,500 of tax refund, which is great, right? That's the whole reason you're putting money into your RSP. It's to save money on taxes. But then you take that tax savings and spend it on something that you'll never use again. Sure, if it's a great experience or you kind of have the flow to that, it can work. But in a perfect situation, I tell all my clients, ideally, people ask, should I do an RSP? Should I do a TFSA? What's the best? And if you're a higher income earner, then you want to put money into the RSP, get your tax refund, put it into the TFSA. So if you have only $5,000 to save in the year and you make $65,000 a year, my recommendation would be put $5,000 into the RSP. You'll get back, let's say $1,000, $1,500. Now you can take that and put it into your TFSA. So you've created a bucket for retirement with your savings, and with the $1,500 of tax refund, your TFSA is now another option to grow tax-free, tax-deferred, all of that. But if you have an emergency, you have a bit of an emergency pool there too. So make sure that you understand when you get a tax refund, utilize that to build more wealth. Don't utilize it to waste away. Or else really at the end of the day, that tax savings, it's gone. It wasn't used for anything. So grab that tax savings, invest it into a TFSA, or even reverse it and throw it back into your RSP and keep compounding that over and over if you have the contribution room. So there's different strategies for it. But for those of you that really build wealth into retirement, if I ask, how did you get to this point? A lot of you, it's, I took my tax refund, I reinvested that, I kept it working, kept it compounding over the last 20, 30, 40 years, and now I have a few $1 million. That's how most of people get to that point. The people that are sitting there with less money saying, I don't get it, and they're spending their tax refund. Start compounding that over 20, 30, 40 years, and you'll realize why the person beside you has much more wealth than you do. The fifth and final mistake, and this is one more in retirement, but again, building up your RSP for that point would be understanding succession rules. What happens to your RSP or your RIF, your retirement income fund, at death? Now, if you have a spouse or common law partner, that fund, so let's say you pass away early, later, doesn't matter when you pass away, if you have a common law partner or a spouse, your RSP or RIF will roll over to them. So there's no tax at point of death. Now, if your spouse or common law partner passed away a day later, then there'd be tax on that. So on second death is when the tax bill is due if there's any money left in the RSP or RIF. So as you build out your retirement plan, you want to understand okay, how do we kind of look at both our accounts individually, but if I die at 65 or 70 a little bit early and my account goes to my spouse, how does she get that out in time so that there's not a big tax bill? And that really comes down to the RSP meltdown that we talk about. So if you don't have a spouse or common law partner, when you pass away, your RSP or your RIF is going to be taxed. So if you have $200,000 left in your RSP when you pass away, that's going to be $200,000 of taxable income in year of death. That's very punitive. And a lot of you are single entering retirement. The stats show there's a lot of you single as you enter and go through retirement. So this applies to a lot of you. So how do you put yourself in a situation where you've worked up, you've built this, you've been working on saving the RSP, you've reinvested your refund, you've done it all right. And then you pass away at 80, a little bit earlier than life expectancy, and you have hundreds of thousands in there, and the government says thank you and takes half that money. You need to make sure you have a tax plan as you go into retirement. Ideally, you want to melt down or draw down that RSP or RIF account by life expectancy. So about mid to late 80s is life expectancy here in Canada for someone entering retirement. Now, if you have your whole family passed away early and you have bad health, maybe you want to do it a bit earlier. That's up to you. Have that conversation with your planner. Typically, by avoiding that big tax issue at the end and taking more earlier and leveling it out, puts more money back in your pocket. You end up paying much more less tax to CRA, and you create a better estate situation. Like you're moving that RSP into a tax-free savings account so that your loved ones actually get all that money versus half that money. So again, look at an RSP meltdown. We have a great video on that. We'll click that link up here so you can watch that video about RSP meltdown. How does that work? How do you actually put more after-tax money in your pocket, pay less tax, and create a better situation? So understand what happens to your accounts when you pass away and the importance of looking at a proper plan as you go through retirement. If you need help with that plan, our office has a full team of planners that can walk through that with you and just get you on a better path going forward for retirement. www.parallelwealth.com/planning. We'll put that link below as well. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in the next one.